we know what Melania was trying to get out in front of. And you guys need to stay around and listen to this, because this is an Epstein break that goes deep. So this young woman, I'm going to read you this post from X. It says, it's by Amanda Ungaro, Ungaro. Now, I did just a quick search for her. She is a Brazilian model. She is also known to socialize in the P-class and diplomatic circles. And in 2025, she was taken into ICE custody. She wrote this, and it says, "Hello, Melania. I was around you for 20 years. You knew I was inside ICE. And you know what hurts after all this time? I stayed close to your family, your mother and your father, not because of you, but because of them, at events and everything else. So shut your mouth when speaking about me, because I will expose everything I know. I have nothing left to lose in my life. I will tear down the entire system. Be careful with me, bitch." What does this tell us? The victims, we're wondering why more victims aren't coming forward, why people aren't saying things, because if she is to be believed, the victims are still in the circles with the perpetrators. This is a level of sickness I am having a hard time wrapping my head around. They're victimized as children, and they grow up and they're still in the same circles. They're socializing together. They are working in the White House. This is, and if this woman really is who if she really does have this information, she is breaking loose from that. It's like leaving a cult. This is big. We need to watch this and go love your neighbor.
I always say just one more video before bed, and then I get something. And in 2010, he ate a garden slug that crawled across his friend's patio as a silly dare. Within days, he was in a coma that lasted over a year, and he became paralyzed. The slug that he ate was infected with a parasite that caused him to contract rat lungworm disease, and he lived with this for 8 years until he eventually died from it, all because he ate a slug one time. This isn't a true crime case, but it's one of those stories that will always scare me because his life horrifically changed as a result of one quick decision. So let's talk about it. This is Sam Ballard. In 2010, he was a 19-year-old rugby player living in Sydney, Australia. He was funny, an amazing friend, and someone who was always up for a good time. He had his entire life ahead of him, but that would all change one November night in 2010. That evening, Sam was at a house party with one of his best friends, Jimmy, and a ton of their other friends. The party was being held at Jimmy's house, and they were all drinking some wine and having a good time. As they were all sitting on Jimmy's concrete patio in his backyard, a slug crawled across his porch. Sam teased everyone that he was going to eat it, and everyone kind of egged him on as a dare because they were young and drinking, and this seemed kinda harmless. Before anyone had any time to really think about it, Sam picked up the slug and ate it while it was still alive. The party continued, and no one really thought much of it. But within a few days, Sam became incredibly weak. He was throwing up, having seizures, he was extremely dizzy, and had severe pain in his legs. He became so sick that his mom took him to the doctor, and initially she thought that Sam could have multiple sclerosis because his dad had that and struggled with it. But the doctors ruled this out, and at first everyone was stumped as to why he was so sick. But then Sam said that while he was at the party, he ate a garden slug. His mom kind of brushed this off and said that no one really gets sick from that sort of thing. But this caught the doctor's attention, and after running more tests, they confirmed some really scary news. Sam contracted rat lungworm disease as a result of eating the slug, which was infected with it. Rat lungworm disease is caused by a parasite called Angiostrongylus cantonensis. This parasite lodges itself in the lungs of rats and eventually comes out of their poop. Then comes along a slug or some other type of animal that either eats the rat poop or the parasite finds a way to work itself inside the animal, infecting it. Humans can be infected with this parasite if they eat the raw or undercooked animals who have been contaminated with the parasite. You can also be infected by consuming vegetables that house small snails snails or slugs. So if you don't thoroughly wash your veggies, I would start doing that just in case. Even your drinks can be contaminated with worms if they are left open for snails or slugs to enter them. So just FYI. But humans are a dead-end host for this parasite. They don't reproduce once they're inside of you, but they kind of get lost, so to speak, and they don't always come out when you poop. Instead of passing through the digestive tract, the worm will get lost and go into your brain and pretty much just stay there. When it eventually gets to your brain, you can get eosinophilic meningitis, which is inflammation of the membranes surrounding your brain and spinal cord. So this affects your brain activity and your entire nervous system. According to the symptom list from the CDC, Sam showed all the signs. Most cases of rat lung disease are usually mild, and people who contract this illness typically get over it within a few days or weeks. But there are rare cases like Sam's, where it caused catastrophic brain damage. Right after he was diagnosed, Sam fell into a coma that lasted 421 days. When he woke up, he was paralyzed, unable to eat without a tube, and he could hardly move. From that point on, he required constant, around-the-clock care. Although this illness wreaked havoc on his body, it didn't affect him mentally. He still understood everything that was going on around him, and when his friend Jimmy came to visit him in the hospital and apologized for letting him eat that slug, Sam started bawling his eyes out. He was essentially locked inside his body, all from one decision. Throughout the years and his declining health, his friends stuck by his side through it all. Every weekend, they were there with him, and Sam never once blamed any of them. They all came together and created what they called Team Ballard, and together they raised a ton of money for Sam's medical bills. Sadly, 8 years after contracting this rare parasite from eating the slug, Sam died on November 2nd, 2018. He was 28 years old. His very last words were "I love you" over and over again to his mom. After he was diagnosed, and again with his passing, his friends all changed the way they acted and made decisions. Like, this whole situation really traumatized them, because they all thought they were just having some harmless fun. None of them meant for this to happen, and no one could have expected it to happen either. It was so rare and honestly just a freak accident. His friend Jimmy has gone on to say, quote, "Before you jump off a roof into a pool, or dare your friend to eat something stupid, think about it. It could have the worst consequence." End quote. Although I'm sure it's a decision that Sam wished he could have taken back, it's stories like this that really stick with you and make you realize that one small choice could deeply affect the rest of your life.
Not one, but two female teachers were allegedly grooming the same student, and what's even crazier is one of the teachers is Noah Beck's sister. Firstly, do not send hate to anybody mentioned in this case. If Noah's sister has done something, it's not his fault and he shouldn't be harassed for this. Secondly, just to confirm, he has two sisters, Haley and Tatum. This is Haley we're talking about. Haley has a degree in secondary education and teaching, but she was put on leave from her job in a school in Arizona due to these allegations. The claims are that this student at this school was being groomed by not one, but two teachers way older than him. One being Angela Berkler, aged 47, and one being Haley Beck, aged 27. The allegations against Haley are that she had a sexual relationship with this teenage student. Police believe that she'd been letting the student drive her car. She was buying him tequila and weed and sending him $630 on Apple Pay. Police seized her phone and they say that they found loads and loads of texts between the pair where she called the student her sugar baby and offered him OS. But this actually all came out because the victim's nan found an X-rated video of the other teacher, the 47-year-old. She was recording herself doing God knows what, saying his name. The nan rang the police and it kind of feels like it's just all started spiraling. It's a big snowball effect and everything's just coming out now. Police said for about 6 weeks, Haley and the student exchanged over 4,000 texts about sexual and illegal activity. Allegedly, some texts from Haley said, "I mean, yeah, I guess, but even though our situation is still not right, at least we are closer in age. I don't like being compared to Mrs. B." In a handwritten note to the student found during a police search of her apartment, Haley wrote, "For this relationship being extremely wrong, I feel like we've really made the most of it. There is truly no other student, I know so wrong, that I'd want to do all of this with."
Let's talk about celebrities who are not very good people, some of which you might not even know about. Part 2. Paul Walker is an American actor who passed away in 2013 in a pretty tragic car accident. He was, and personally in my opinion still is, a pretty well-loved actor who was best known for his roles in the Fast and Furious movies. At the time of his death, he had a long-term girlfriend called Jasmine Pilchard Gosnell. They had been dating for 7 years. When Paul Walker died, he was 40 and she was 23. I'm not that fantastic at maths, but they'd been dating for 7 years, which means that they started dating when she was 16 and he was 33. This wasn't really well known because he did keep it very secretive, because it was especially controversial considering the age of consent in California is 18, meaning she was a minor when their relationship started. And it wasn't the first time either. Apparently, when he was 26, he had a girlfriend who was 15. There is a lot of pictures of him on the internet with young girls. You can Google them. If you're a lover of 80s movies, then you'd probably recognize this gentleman. His name is Jeffrey Jones, and he starred in movies like Beetlejuice and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And when the sequel of Beetlejuice came out just 2 years ago, I was quite confused as to why he wasn't in the sequel. Back in the early 2000s, his career came to quite an abrupt halt. And that was because he was charged with soliciting a minor and possession of child porn. In 2003, he was sentenced to 5 years probation. He has still gone on to act in some projects, though. Quite rightly so, for the sequel of Beetlejuice, they killed off his character in quite a brutal fashion. This seems to be quite interesting to some people, so I'm going to continue with this series. If there's anyone that you want me to cover, drop it in the comments. Let me know. Give me a follow.
The mommy blogger that killed her own child. This is like the Gypsy Rose case with an even more devastating ending. Lacey Spears said that she always wanted to be a mom, and it was like a dream come true when her son Garnett was born. But only days after Garnett was born, his mother Lacey was taking him to the ER saying that he was very sick and wasn't eating. And at only a few months old, at his mother's request, Garnett had a feeding tube put in and his throat closed so he wouldn't be able to throw up. Remember that for later because it'll be important. Garnett was a very sick child, and his mother Lacey would document it all on her blog and her social media accounts, but in reality, Lacey was the sick one. Garnett was perfectly healthy. Lacey was purposefully making her child sick for sympathy, attention, and online clout. Like many times before, in January of 2014, Lacey took her son Garnett to the ER, this time saying that he was experiencing seizures. After multiple tests, the nurses and doctors didn't see any seizure activity happening with Garnett, so they were getting ready to discharge him from the hospital. Within 10 minutes of the nurses and doctors leaving Garnett's hospital room, Garnett went from being a perfectly healthy 5-year-old boy to being brain dead and then passing away with no medical explanation why. Hospital staff was super suspicious, so they reported it to the police. Garnett had passed away from a lethal amount of sodium found in his system with no explanation on how it got there. An investigation started right away, and really quickly there was a lot of suspicious stuff that started being uncovered about his mom. They got a search warrant for their home, and where all of Garnett's medical supplies was, like all of his medicine, his feeding tube, his feeding bags, there was a container of sea salt. And a friend of Lacey's told the police that like immediately after Garnett passed away in the hospital, Lacey was texting her being like, yo, go into my house and throw out all of Garnett's feeding tubes and feeding bags, but don't tell anyone why. So suspicious. I can't believe she didn't know that she was gonna get caught. So obviously they tested the feeding bags that were in the home and in the trash, and they all contained a large amount of salt in them. And then a bomb dropped. There was security footage that Lacey didn't know about from Garnett's hospital room. Parts of it's online. I don't feel comfortable showing it, but you can find it online if you want. But it shows 5-year-old Garnett sitting in his hospital bed, looking super healthy, bouncing around on his bed. And then when the doctors and nurses leave the room, shows his mother take the feeding tube, take Garnett out of the bed, who's super healthy, take him into the bathroom, and then Garnett leaves the bathroom, an extremely sick child in a lot of pain and trying to throw up. But Garnett was unable to throw up the poison that his mother had just given him because she had had his throat closed when he was only a newborn. Lacey was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, and to this day she's never admitted what she did or shown any remorse for what she did and the 5 years of torture and pain that she did to her child.
Most of us have had a friend who didn't treat us right, but what Suzanne Capper experienced goes way beyond that. It goes beyond humanity. Suzanne was a sweet, gentle 16-year-old girl from Greater Manchester who just wanted to belong. She didn't have a stable home growing up, so when a woman named Jean Powell opened her front door, Suzanne stepped right in, grateful, trusting, and completely unaware of what that decision would cost her. One day, while Suzanne was just minding her business at the house, a bunch of Jean's friends who also crashed at the house started blaming her for giving them lice. And Suzanne, confused by this absurd statement, is like, "What? Head lice? I don't have that. What are you talking about?" But still, even after her denying it, nobody in the house was believing her. They just kept calling her disgusting and a pig. So she ran out of the house, probably crying, and decided to stay at her stepfather's house to get herself away from everybody. But after a few days of Suzanne isolating herself, Jean and one of her friends, Bernadette, started getting really bored around the house. Because you see, this wasn't like the friends who mess with each other as a joke group dynamic you think it is. Jean and her friends, Bernadette, Glenn, Anthony, Jeffrey, and Clifford, all found entertainment by bullying Suzanne. They'd basically take advantage of her kindness and use her as a punching bag. But Suzanne didn't really stand up for herself either. She was just really thankful to even be considered as part of their friend group, despite how mean they are to her. So one day, Jean and Bernadette came up with this hilarious prank to pull on Suzanne. But because she was still at her stepdad's house, they kind of realized, well, we need a way to lure her back to our house. So the whole group started plotting, and that's when they come up with an idea. Jean and Bernadette went out to Suzanne's stepdad's house and knocked on the door. And when Suzanne opened it and saw Jean standing there with Bernadette, she probably asked, "What do you want?" And very kindly, they both told her, "Well, we just wanted to let you know that someone at our house is looking for you. I think it's the boy that you like. Remember him?" And Suzanne, elated by this, probably said, "Really? Oh my gosh, then let's go." So she closed the door behind her and they all walked back together to Jean's house, not knowing that Jean and Bernadette just successfully completed step 1 to luring her out of the house. When they finally got to the house, Bernadette is telling Suzanne, "You should go through the door first, since, he is technically waiting for you." And so, not thinking much of it, Suzanne grabs the door handle, pushes the door open, and yang! Suzanne's body gets pulled inside and shoved to the ground. And before she could even realize what is going on, the sound of razors clicks on and something fuzzy is falling down onto her lap. It's her hair. They're shaving her hair off. Suzanne is screaming, trying to scramble to her feet, but hands are pressing her down. Multiple sets of hands. And the razor keeps going. Jean is laughing, Bernadette is laughing, Glenn, Anthony, Jeffrey, Clifford, all of them are circling around her like this is the funniest thing they've ever seen. And it was all because they wanted payback for her giving them head lice, which, mind you, wasn't even proven. And when it was finally over, Suzanne's head is nearly bald. She's sitting on the floor, trembling, surrounded by clumps of her own hair, and nobody is helping her. You must be another level of evil to set up your friend like that. But here's where it gets darker, because this wasn't the end of the prank. This was just the beginning. They started yelling at Suzanne, saying, "Well, look at this mess of hair you made. Clean it up." And without any choice in the matter, she was forced to pick up her own hair off the floor as if she were the reason it was there. And then afterwards, they beat her, going back and forth with their fists and suffocating her with a plastic bag, but taking it off right before she passes out so that they can keep taunting her. And when it was over, Jean locked her in a cupboard for the rest of the night, where Suzanne screamed until morning. When the next day came, the group got so tired of hearing her screams all night that they made a decision that tells you everything you need to know about how far gone they already were. They moved Suzanne to Bernadette's old house just a few buildings down, where they knew they wouldn't have to worry about hearing her screams. They then stripped her down in such an intrusive way. They tied her spread eagle to an upturned bed frame using electrical wire, ropes, belts, and chains. Then they stuffed a whole bunch of dirty socks into her mouth to try to muffle out any more screams. And then they left her there. As Suzanne laid there, laying on top of barbed wire in excruciating pain, she's now realizing the reality of her situation. Her so-called friends are keeping her held captive. But through it all, Suzanne kept thinking that maybe if she cooperates the way that they want, then they'll stop. They'll get bored of me and let me go. But that is not what happened. Over the next several days, Suzanne suffered through torture unlike anything a human should ever endure. The group, most of them high on a whole bunch of substances, came in and out of that house over and over again, beating her, burning her with cigarettes all over her body, injecting her with drugs against her will, and at one point pulling her teeth out with pliers and leaving her nerves completely exposed. At some point, they shoved her body into a bathtub filled with concentrated disinfectant, and they scrubbed her cut up skin with a yard brush. And through all of it, through every single session they would do, Bernadette would walk into that room and taunt her by saying the same thing before she started. Chucky's coming to play. Bro, that is demonic. Now, here's the part of the story that really haunts me the most, and I need you to sit with this for a second. At some point during those 5 days, a man named David Hill came to the house. He walked in and saw Suzanne. He saw the condition that she was in, tied to the bed frame, injured, barely able to speak. And Suzanne looked at him and begged him for help. She said, "Please untie me. Please, can you help me?" But David looked at her and said, "I can't. I'm sorry. I don't want them to get mad at me." And he left the house without saying a word. Suzanne stayed tied to that bed alone, knowing that someone had just seen her and still chose to walk away. I think about what that moment must have felt like for her more than I probably should. And it breaks my heart because all she ever truly wanted was to be loved back. Why is life so unfair? I don't understand. 5 days later, on December 14th, in the early hours of the morning, the group decided that it was time to get rid of her. I guess they got bored. So they forced Suzanne into a car and drove her 15 miles out to a stretch of countryside on the outskirts of Stockport. Suzanne hasn't seen the light of day in what feels like forever. She's weak, she's exhausted, and somewhere in the fog of everything that her body has been put through, a small, desperate thought starts to form. Maybe it was over. Maybe they're done. The car has been moving for a while now, and she can't see where they're going, but the motion itself feels like relief. Maybe they're taking her somewhere, dropping her off and walking away from all of this. But then the car stops. Before Suzanne can make sense of anything, Bernadette yanks her out and shoves her down an embankment on the side of the road, her body tumbling in the dark, hitting the cold earth at the bottom. And then she smells it. The sharp, pungent smell of petrol already soaking into her clothes and skin before she could even react. Bernadette is standing over her, pouring it, emptying the whole container of fuel onto her body. And when it's finally on its last drop, she throws it to the side, grabs a lighter, and clicks it on. But it doesn't flame up, so she clicks again. But it still won't go. And I think in this moment, a sane person would take this as a sign that, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is crossing the line. Just let her live. But no. Not for Bernadette or Jean or the whole group for that matter. She yells back to the group and says, "Hey, this dumbass lighter isn't working. Let me get yours." And they toss her a new one. She catches it, clicks it on, and the flame just glows in between Suzanne's eyes as she stares at Bernadette for any type of mercy. But Bernadette smiles at her and whispers, "Burn, baby. Burn," before lighting Suzanne's entire body up into scorching flames. The group gets back in the car and drive away as they watch Suzanne burn on the side of the road. But little did they know how much fight Suzanne had left in her, because despite everything they put her through, she was still here. The flames eventually burned out, and Suzanne Capper was still alive. Broken, barely breathing, but alive. Like her body refused to let them have the last word. She managed to use her last bit of energy to crawl up to the side of the road where a few men driving past spotted her and stopped. What they saw when they got out of their car was something that they have never been able to forget. Her hands looked like ash, her legs were raw meat, and her feet were so badly charred that they were almost unrecognizable. And yet, despite how much pain she was in, she was still thanking them, politely and quietly thanking these strangers who stopped to help her. That detail alone should tell you everything you need to know about who Suzanne Capper really was. A truly just loving and kind person. When she was rushed to the hospital, Suzanne did something absolutely remarkable. While she was in and out of consciousness, she found the strength to give the doctors the names and addresses of all 6 of her attackers. Every single one of them. And not long after, she quietly slipped into a coma, and Suzanne never woke back up. Suzanne Capper died on December 18th, 1992 at Withington Hospital, surrounded by her parents and people who truly loved her. She was only 16 years old, you guys. 16. All 6 of these worthless clumps of cells were tried and convicted, with Bernadette, Jean, and Glenn receiving life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. Anthony, who was only 16 at the time, received a minimum of 18 years. Clifford received 15, and Jeffrey received 12. Suzanne Capper just wanted somewhere to belong. She deserved so much better than the people that she found. So please remember her name. I will see you next time. Mwah. Group hug.
A mysterious man checked into a hotel acting very strange. Days later, he was found dead. And the most chilling part, he technically never even existed. On Friday the 12th of June 2009, this mysterious man was spotted at the Ulster bus depot in Derry. This was a sleepy Irish town, absolutely gorgeous. Now this guy looked pretty normal to the untrained eye. He had grey hair, glasses, and a thick German accent. He was carrying a black luggage bag, and you'd probably presume that he was away on like a work trip. At 6:30 that day, he arrived at Sligo bus station and then grabbed a taxi to get to the nearby Sligo City Hotel. So far, nothing strange, right? He greeted the receptionist and he checked in for 3 nights. Now, he interestingly paid with cash and gave the name Peter Bergman. Over the next couple of days, it's not entirely clear what he was doing in the hotel, but he was caught on CCTV acting really weird. All he seemed to do was be going outside and smoking, and then he was carrying around this purple plastic bag. The reason the bag was so interesting is that it was always full when he took it out of the hotel, and then when he came back it was empty. It was kind of like he was taking things out of the hotel and dumping them somewhere. Day after he arrived, he bought some airmail stickers at the post office. Now there's a lot of guesswork here because we really don't know what he did with those stickers. I guess we could presume that he posted something, but nobody knows what and who to. But it gets even weirder. On the 15th of June, he checks out of the hotel. He left his room key and a do not disturb sign. Nothing seems off yet. He was caught on CCTV grabbing a coffee and then headed down towards Ross's Point Beach. He wasn't seen again until the following day at 6 a.m. A dad and son were walking together along the beach and something caught their eye. At first they were like, is that a mannequin lying on the floor or like a life-size doll? No. It was a body. Washed up on the beach was the dead body of this Peter Bergman. But as if finding a dead body on a beach isn't horrifying enough, when police start investigating, they realise, hang on, this guy was apparently staying at the nearby hotel as Peter Bergman, but the name Peter Bergman doesn't exist. And things only got stranger when they completed the autopsy. The medical examiner was like, I've got something really weird to tell you. Turns out this guy's clothing, every single one of the labels on it is cut out. Who cuts every single clothing label off themselves unless they don't want to be traced? Now, he had no ID to suggest that he had any other identity other than this Peter Bergman, but Peter Bergman wasn't a real person. And the results of the autopsy were that he died by drowning, no signs of a struggle or any foul play. But he was interestingly found to have terminal cancer. So who the hell was this man? Investigators were like, we can just look at the hotel and see what address he checked in with. They typed it into the computer and it didn't exist. Why did he check in with a fake name and address? His fingerprints didn't even match anybody on the database. It was so bizarre. Was he on the run? I guess that could kind of make sense, but what from or who from? Did he unalive himself? Did someone else do it? Was he scared? What the hell was he carrying around in that purple bag and where was he disposing of it? The police actually searched high and low for that bag or the contents of it and found absolutely nothing. And what did he post and who to? Another bizarre fact about this case is that not one single person ever reported him missing. No friends and no family. He was eventually, sadly, buried in an unmarked grave and his DNA does remain on file just waiting. Please let me know your theories on this. I'm absolutely desperate to hear what you guys think could have been the rationale for all of this. This case is very similar to the mystery of the Oslo Hotel, which I covered on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation, ages ago. If you're interested in cases like this, you can find that on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
This man is having an affair with this woman. They're both cheating on their spouses. It's a twisted love square, but one of these four people won't make out of it alive. Ashley always dreamed of being a mom and having a big family, so in college, when she met and fell in love with Emmett Corrigan, she thought her dreams were about to come true. It was love at first sight. They really just had like that spark, and they were engaged after only 2 months of dating and married after 5. And very shortly after that, they were expecting twins and then their third child shortly later. Ashley and Emmett were overjoyed. Their life was perfect. In 2008, Emmett wanted a change of career and started law school. Around the time that Emmett was finishing law school, they welcomed their 4th child and then were quickly expecting their 5th baby. Emmett was only 30 years old, but he actually started his own criminal defense practice on top of already working full-time for another firm. With the workload increase, Emmett decided that he needed a little bit of help, and that help came in the form of 40-year-old Candy Hall, who was an experienced paralegal, and despite her also being married and having 2 teenage daughters, within 2 weeks, Emmett and Candy were having an affair. And meanwhile, Emmett's wife Ashley is pregnant with his 5th child, and she started getting a feeling that something was wrong. I mean, Emmett was disconnected. He was missing doctor appointments. Like, of course he was working hard, but this was definitely different. Ashley suspected that possibly Emmett was having an affair with Candy, but like that didn't make sense to her either. I mean, Ashley was in her 20s and Candy was 40, 10 years older than Emmett. Emmett even told Ashley, like, don't be worried about her. She's a motherly figure to me. Like, he literally called the woman that he was sleeping with a mother to him, which is just yuck. And then when Ashley actually gave birth to her and Emmett's 5th child, Candy went to the hospital and like showered her and the new baby in gifts. So she was kind of like, okay, she's definitely not sleeping with my husband, so why is my husband acting so disconnected and distant from me? And at the exact same time, actually, Candy's husband, Rob Hall, was experiencing a very similar thing, but he actually had concrete proof that Candy was cheating on him with her boss because he went through her emails and he was pissed. On the morning of March 11th of 2011, Ashley woke up determined to get to the bottom of things and figure out like what was going on in her marriage and try to repair it. She thought, you know, maybe my overworked husband just needs a little bit of a reminder of this beautiful life that we've created together. So that day while Emmett was at work, Ashley cleaned the entire house. She made this big, beautiful dinner that was Emmett's favorite meal. The table was set. The kids were dressed to the nines. All 5 kids looked beautiful. Ashley was looking like a 10. She thought maybe they could have this beautiful night as a family together, remind, you know, him what he has. And then after they have this great night together, maybe they could talk and start to repair their marriage. That night, Emmett came home late like he did so many nights before. The dinner was cold, the kids were already in bed. And then he told Ashley that he had already eaten at the office and didn't even have a single bite of this beautiful meal that she prepared. And like so many nights before in the Corrigan household, a fight broke out between Ashley and Emmett. And then Emmett decided he had enough and he told his wife that he was going to be leaving again and be going to Walgreens to pick up an errand. Ashley was begging her husband, please don't leave, like let's talk about this, but he just left. And at the same time across town, Candy Hall was telling her husband, Rob, that she also had to make an errand at Walgreens around 9 p.m. Both Emmett and Candy arrived at Walgreens parking lot, and then Candy got in Emmett's truck. They drove around for a while, and then they parked in a nearby neighborhood and slept together in the truck. Coincidentally, one of Candy's teenage daughters was also making a trip to Walgreens. It was purely coincidence. She sees her mom's empty car in the parking lot and she doesn't see her mom in the store. So she calls up her mom and of course Candy was busy. So she didn't answer. So her daughter called her father, Rob, and Rob immediately knew that she was with Emmett. Rob calls his wife Candy, and I guess at this point Candy was finished because she answered that phone call. and he asked her if she was with Emmett, and she said she was, but she was going to be going back to the Walgreens to get her car and she'd be home shortly. But then Emmett took Candy's phone and started speaking to Rob, and I guess was belittling him about what he was packing downstairs, or I guess not packing downstairs, and also about how much money he made. And then Rob told Emmett, why don't you go be with your wife and 5 kids? And they were just yelling at each other on the phone. And then I guess at some point during the phone call, Rob decides to just go to Walgreens and confront his wife in person and the man that she was sleeping with. Almost immediately, as Rob, Emmett, and Candy all got to Walgreens, all 3 of them are out of their car and the 2 men are yelling at each other. So Candy claims she had enough of it and she turned and started walking towards her car. And she claims that when her back was turned, she heard 3 gunshots go off. And then a 911 call was made. When the police arrived at the scene, both men were on the ground and injured, but one of them was already deceased. 30-year-old Emmett Corrigan, father of 5, successful lawyer, had been shot twice and was tragically already gone. Rob had a surface level wound, but he survived. And then he went on to say that Emmett charged him first and also shot him first, and that what he did was in self-defense. But Rob was the only one with GSR on his hands. It was also his weapon that he clearly brought to the parking lot to confront Emmett with, so he was arrested. Around 1 a.m., several officers went to break the news to Ashley that her husband, the father of her children, was gone. He had been killed at the hands of the husband of his secret mistress. I couldn't even begin to imagine the conflicting emotions that she was feeling in that moment. I mean, obviously she's sad. Her husband and the father of her children are now gone. I'm sure she was also really hurt learning that all along her husband was having an affair, but I imagine she was also really angry that these 3 people were making these decisions that permanently changed her life forever, and she had no idea that any of it was even happening. Now she's 28 years old, left to raise 5 children all by herself. Her and Emmett's youngest child was only 6 weeks old at the time. During Rob's trial, Candy supported her husband and even testified in support of him, but he was found guilty anyway. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison with a chance of parole in 2028. 2 families permanently altered and changed and ruined forever. For what reason? Ashley's strength through all of this is something I truly admire. I mean, she's a young mom of 5, and she seems like a really, really, really great mother. She's an advocate for women that are suffering with trauma and grief. She wrote a book about her experience. She has a blog that helps a lot of women. She's remarried now. She had 2 more kids, and she seems truly happy, and I wish her all of the best. If you watched to the end of this video, thank you so, so much. I love you guys so, so much, and I'll see you in only a couple more hours for the second video of the day.
The most terrifying thing about this photo is at a glance you don't even notice anything's wrong. Before we start today's case, if you guys do prefer deep dives, I post a brand new case on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week. It was the 10th of February 2025 in Bighorn County, Wyoming. Family of 6, the Harshman family, looked picture perfect to the outside world. They really looked like they had it all. The couple looked super happy and content together. The kids were adorable. What more could you want? The family were actually somewhat of like a blended family. Tranyelle, the mum, had been previously with this guy, Quinn. They'd had 2 daughters together, the eldest girls, Olivia and Braylee. They had then split up, but their dad was still very much in the girls' lives, and Tranyelle started dating a guy called Cliff. Now, Cliff was an amazing stepdad to these girls. He really did truly care about them and treat them like they were his own daughters. And when Cliff and Tranyelle got married, they had 2 more little girls, Brooke and Jordan. Husband Cliff was actually away on a business trip on this particular date. He worked really hard to provide for his little girls. And at this point, the girls were actually homesick with the flu. Cliff had absolutely no idea of the devastation that he would end up coming home to. On the day in question, at around 1:30 p.m, police got a phone call, and the dispatcher had never heard anything like this before. On the other end of the line, Tranyelle said she had shot her 4 daughters and was about to do the same to herself. The dispatcher scrambled to find the right words. I mean, what do you say in that situation? In the end, she just started pleading with the mum not to do anything, not to move. Please just do not harm yourself. But Tranyelle simply replied that the 2 youngest girls were in their cribs upstairs, dead, and the eldest girls also dead in their shared bedroom. She told the dispatcher it was simply too late. When I say the police and the emergency services raced over to that property, they burst through the door and they were like, please, let's just be able to save one of them. They found Tranyel on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head, but actually still alive. And tiny little Jordan also still had a pulse. They were raced to hospital immediately, and then seemingly another miracle, 7-year-old Olivia was still hanging on to life. But tragically, eventually every single one of them passed away. I actually can't imagine the dad's reaction. Like, imagine hearing that as a father, that your entire family has just been wiped out like that. It actually opened up before about his wife's mental health, about how much she had struggled with postpartum depression and PTSD. These things are no joke, guys. They'd been married for 5 years and he really did support her as best as he could. And she was desperate for help. She tried therapy, she tried taking medication, but it felt like nothing was working. In fact, she felt like the medication was making her worse. She was found to have anti-anxiety medication and illegal substances in her system at the time of her death. And Cliff was like, although I am angry at my wife for doing this, I also still love her and I'm grieving her. He said his wife was not a monster like people make out, and she had an illness, and he couldn't believe how out of character these actions were. Obviously, he never would have left if he thought she was ever going to be capable of doing anything like this.
This is the exact spot where 3-year-old Rachel Runyon was kidnapped 44 years ago. She was playing at the park with her brothers when a man walked up to them, led her away with the promise of bubblegum-flavored ice cream, threw her in the back of his car while she was screaming, and drove away. Her body was found 24 days later in a stream 50 miles away in Mountain Green, Utah. To this day, her killer has never been caught, and chances are he's hurt many more kids since her abduction and murder. I don't live very far away from this location, so this is one of those cases that really weighs heavy on my heart. And since this is one of Utah's most chilling unsolved cases, let's talk about it. This is Rachel Runyon. She was only 3 years old when her life was tragically taken from her in 1982. Her mom and dad are Jeff and Elaine, and right before Rachel was born, they moved to Sunset, Utah from Tennessee. At the time, only 6,000 people lived in Sunset, so Rachel's parents thought that it would be a super safe place to raise their kids. Rachel was the middle child. She had one older brother named Jason, who was 5, and one younger brother named Nathan, who was 18 months. They were a really happy and young family, and Rachel was a child beauty queen. Her mom entered her into a last-minute contest, and she won the title Little Miss Sunset the year before her murder. And Rachel was described as a really well-behaved little kid who loved to belly laugh. They lived adjacent to Doxey Elementary School and Mitchell Park, and one of the kids' favorite things to do was play at that park and the school's playground. They loved it so much that in the summer of 1982, the Runyons actually installed a gate door in their backyard fence so that the kids could easily access the park. Elaine never let her kids go to the park alone though. She was pretty much always with them. Although Sunset was generally a safe area, she still taught her kids about stranger danger just to be safe. But on August 26, 1982, Justin and Rachel asked if they could take their little brother to the playground, the one right in front of their house. Elaine almost said no because she was in the middle of making everyone lunch, so this meant that the kids would have had to go alone. Like I said, she never allowed this, but the Doxey Elementary playground was literally just 15 feet away from their backyard, and Elaine could see them from the kitchen window, so she agreed and let them go play for a little bit unattended. She kept her eyes on the kids and even cracked the window a few times to talk to them, and at first, everything was fine. The kids were all playing in the sandbox and having fun like usual. But then 12:55 p.m. hits, and this is when Elaine is officially done making lunch, so she yells outside for the kids to come back, but only 2 of her kids return, 5-year-old Justin and 18-month-old Nathan. Rachel was nowhere to be found. Then Justin blurted something out that would forever change the Runyons' lives. Someone took Rachel. He said that she was taken literally just seconds before by a man who offered to buy her bubblegum-flavored ice cream at the nearby supermarket. Justin said that they were first approached by the man when all 3 of them were playing in the sandbox at Doxey Elementary School, and the man tried luring all of them to his car by offering to purchase them candy. He stayed and talked to the Runyon kids for about 15 minutes before they all got up and walked across the parking lot to Mitchell Park, which was the one right behind their house. But as they got closer to the man's car, Rachel told him that she really loved bubblegum-flavored ice cream, to which the man replied, "Perfect. I have that flavor in my car." Justin tried telling Rachel not to go with this creepy man, but just as Rachel turned to continue walking, the man picked her up forcefully and shoved her into his car as she was screaming. Justin said that Rachel couldn't get out, and then the man drove away as he stood there, frozen in fear. I mean, can you imagine watching this happened to your little sister with no way to help because you're also just a little kid. This is when he and his brother came home to tell their mom what happened. Elaine asked Justin what this man looked like, and he said that he was a light-skinned African-American or Hispanic man who had a mustache with a gap in it. He was around 6 feet tall, maybe around 30 years old, and he drove a blue car with wood grain stripes down the sides. So Elaine rushed to the nearby supermarket where this unknown man said he was taking Rachel, and she asked everyone in the store if they'd seen a, quote, 3-year-old little blonde girl with a black man. End quote. But nobody had. They never even saw the car in question, so it was clear that the man was obviously lying and never took her to the store to get ice cream. Within 20 minutes, Elaine reported Rachel missing to the Sunset Police Department, and right away, a massive search began. Authorities set up roadblocks all throughout the city, and a big team was assembled which included several officers from different nearby counties. But it was like Rachel vanished into thin air. They also didn't have much to go off of evidence-wise. There were no cameras at Doxy Elementary or any working cameras nearby, so no CCTV footage was available. This meant no concrete photo evidence of the suspect, and there was no evidence left behind at the playground either, so this kind of stunted the investigation a little bit. But then a witness came forward claiming to have seen the abduction. It was a 10-year-old kid who witnessed this, but that's not all. This kid said that they were also approached by the suspect this same day, literally just moments before Rachel's abduction. This kid was at Mitchell Park, the park that was pretty much in the Runyon's backyard. The man was seen talking to several kids at this park, including the witness, and drinking coffee just watching them. He hung out there for about 15 minutes before walking over to Doxy Elementary, where he then talked to the Runyon kids for about 15 minutes, and then, as we all know, he abducted Rachel. So this kid was able to give police a pretty detailed description of the man. He was a light-complexioned African-American, around 30 years old, and he for sure drove an older model 4-door dark blue car with wood grain stripes along the sides. Justin's description was pretty similar, but the hair description was off. And according to Justin, he thought that the man could have been a light-skinned Hispanic rather than African-American. So some things were a bit off, and he even asked authorities to make those changes when drawing the composite sketch. But they told him that they were sticking with the 10-year-old witness's description because he's, quote, older and knows better. End quote. Which is infuriating because Justin was up close with this guy for a long period of time. I know he was 5, but he literally watched this man kidnap his sister. So anyway, police released this composite sketch to the public, but they were super limited in what they could do in the investigation since there was hardly any evidence of what took place. So they did what they could. Go door to door in the neighborhood and knock, and quietly hope that someone would come forward and confess more information. They relied heavily on the public, issuing a lot of press conferences, and the neighborhood really came together to help the family out. They donated a lot of money to continue searching, and they even assembled a neighborhood search committee. Together, they distributed thousands of missing person flyers, so it didn't matter where you lived, you knew Rachel's name and saw her picture. But within 3 weeks of this alone cost the Runyon family $10,000 in just postage fees alone. I say this just to give you guys an idea of how expensive something like this is for the families of missing or murdered loved ones. I mean, outside of dealing with the stress of the investigation and the awful grief, they're then expected to pay huge fees like this just to keep their stories out in the public eye. At one of the press conferences, Elaine acknowledged the possibility that Rachel was sold, and she pleaded for anyone who was going to be adopting a little girl in the near future to double check and make sure that it wasn't Rachel. So they were really coming at this from any angle possible for hopefully some type of answer. But sadly, 24 days later, they would finally have some answers. It just wasn't the one anyone was hoping for. On September 19th, 1982, a family was driving down this really remote road in Mountain Green, Utah. This is a really mountainy area and about 50 miles from Sunset where Rachel was last seen. The family stopped their car at the turnout near Trappers Loop Road to let their kids out so they could stretch their legs and play a little bit. So the kids went over to a nearby stream and started throwing rocks in the water, but something quickly caught their eye. At first they thought that it was a doll in the water near a pile of brush, but as they got closer, they realized that it was actually the body of a little girl, floating face down. She was nude and had been hogtied. The little girl was almost unrecognizable due to the advanced state of decomposition, but Elaine was brought in who confirmed the worst possible news. This was Rachel. She knew immediately by a chipped tooth and the earrings that she was wearing. Because of the state of her body, authorities couldn't determine a cause of death, just that she was in fact murdered. It's been reported that there was some evidence found near her body that was suspicious, but multiple DNA tests came back as inconclusive. Rachel was eventually buried in the Washington Heights Memorial Park with her favorite Raggedy Ann doll. Her gravestone is inscribed with the words, quote, "She brought a nation to its knees." End quote. The detail about the Raggedy Ann doll makes me so incredibly sad and brings me to tears because I also have a 3-year-old little girl and I cannot imagine burying her like that with her favorite stuffy. It's just devastating. So now that her body was found, police shifted their focus to finding her killer, but somehow he got away. To this day, police have never been able to track him down and her murder remains unsolved. There have been 2 suspects though, but they have never been named publicly. The first suspect came to light in 2007. This man apparently now lives in New Mexico, but Sunset police say that there is evidence supporting his guilt, but I guess not enough for them to make a formal arrest. At a press conference, Rachel's dad Jeff looked into the camera and addressed this man. He said, quote, "We know you, and we know you by name." End quote. He went on to say that he knows this man is responsible because his own sister turned him in, and then certain evidence was found in his car that tied him to Rachel's case. But this person, who again has never been publicly named, threatened to kill his sister if she didn't take back her statement, so she did. Thus, he was never formally charged. But according to police, this man still remains a suspect to this day. I guess they're just waiting for him to slip up or for someone to rat him out. Another possible person of interest came to light in 2012. He was a prison inmate in Pennsylvania who just so happened to live in Sunset in 1982, not far from where Rachel disappeared. But he too has never been charged because of the lack of evidence. The Runyons have said in the past few years that they have some ideas about who might be responsible and are working with authorities, but still, whoever did this has never been caught. In 2022, a woman came forward anonymously and claimed that her uncle killed Rachel. She also never publicly named him, but she said that her brother and Rachel's brother were in the same class at Doxy Elementary. The woman went on to say that everyone in her family was aware that her uncle could have been the one to do this, even going so far as to say, quote, "I wonder if they've ever looked into insert uncle's name." End quote. Her uncle was reportedly a sexual predator and even drove a car similar to Rachel's killer, which police now believe is a dark blue 1973 Ford Pinto Squire station wagon with wood grain stripes down the sides. But her family ultimately dismissed this theory all those years ago because it was widely pushed that the suspect was African American, not Hispanic like the uncle was. So they let it go and figured that it couldn't be him. The woman tried telling police this, but they never returned her calls. So she took it to the media and a local PI that's been working on Rachel's case with her family. Apparently all of this evidence is circumstantial, but I guess it's now back on the police's radar. So hopefully a thorough investigation will provide some answers. But nonetheless, police believe that whoever killed Rachel either lived in the community or had strong ties to Sunset. And they also believe that this wasn't his first nor his last crime against children. One of the major ways that this case could be solved though is through today's advances in forensic technology. I mean, so much has advanced and developed since 1984 when DNA testing first became a thing, and authorities have even said that they are open to exhuming Rachel's body to do some more testing. As a result of Rachel's murder though, there have been some positive changes to the law, mainly thanks to her mom, who became a huge advocate for child safety. In 2002, the state of Utah formally implemented the Rachel Alert, which is a child abduction alert system. So once law enforcement verified that a child was truly abducted, a Rachel Alert form was faxed to all TV and radio networks for immediate and high-priority statewide broadcast. This alert system was actually used in the 2002 kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart, and then again in the 2003 kidnapping of 3-month-old Nicholas Triplett. Both Elizabeth and Nicholas were found alive, and I'd like to think that if this system existed when Rachel went missing, that she could have been found alive too. Eventually, the Amber Alert was created, so Utah, as well as the rest of the nation, ended up switching to that alert system instead of the Rachel Alert. And in Utah, the Amber Alert is tested twice a year, and one of those dates falls on the anniversary of Rachel's abduction, which I think is a good way to honor her. What's also super cool is that Utah residents will receive the Rachel Runyon Award if they help recover a child after an Amber Alert is activated. I've lived in Utah for 5 years now, and I just learned this, and I think it's such a good way to keep Rachel's story alive. Rachel's case also played a huge factor in the passing of the Missing Children's Act, which puts descriptions of missing children in the FBI's National Crime Information Computer database. And lastly, in 2017, the Rachel Runyon Missing and Exploited Children's Day was put into effect, which falls every year on the date of her abduction, August 26th. This day highlights other missing children within the state. If you want some more information on this case and want to support Rachel's family in uncovering the truth, truth, you can visit their Facebook page called Justice for Rachel Runyon, which I believe is run by her mom. It's incredibly inspiring to see how hard she's fought for her daughter, but I also want her to know that she isn't alone in this fight. We care about her and her daughter's story. I've taken my daughters to the Doxy Elementary playground a handful of times, and I recently walked over to the memorial park named after her. It was so surreal to be standing in the exact same spot that this happened in so many years ago, yet we still have no answers. If you have any information about the unsolved murder of Rachel Runyon, please contact the Sunset Police Department. But it's now been 44 years, and whoever took Rachel from the park that day and destroyed so many lives in the process remains a mystery.
What if the doctor you trusted to make your poorly child better was a convicted paedophile, and the hospital knew? I feel like this has been kept very quiet in the media. Before we get into today's case, if you guys do prefer deep dives, I do post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation, every single week. It was actually way back in 2004 that the FBI originally began to suspect that this well-respected doctor could be a threat to children. They had this guy called Joel Laskuarnek on their radar after his computer was flagged to be visiting disturbing CA websites. You'd probably think, okay, brilliant, the FBI are onto it, like, he's going to get struck off, surely. No, actually, this man was allowed to continue working in a hospital, working with vulnerable children under anaesthetic. He was working in both public and private hospitals in Brittany and west of France, and he was just allowed to keep his job and had a slap on the wrist. And it wasn't due to his colleagues' lack of trying. Actually, several were really suspicious of this guy and the way that he talked about children with really sexual language. And when they confronted him, he even admitted, almost like he was proud of it, that he had this sentence for CSA material. But honestly, it felt like these colleagues were just talking to a brick wall when they tried to raise their concerns with anybody. As if it wasn't horrific enough that the doctors reported him and nothing was done, he even got a promotion. It defies belief. So it was only actually after he retired in 2017 a brave little girl spoke up, and thank God she did. She unfortunately became the neighbor of this Joel guy, and one day went up to her dad, and honestly, what she said made him sick to his stomach. She told her dad that their old neighbor had not only exposed himself to her through the fence, but also molested her. As you can imagine, the dad's world just came crumbling down. I honestly don't know how, as a parent, you deal with that kind of information without ending up with murder charges on your hands. He immediately got police on the phone, and Joel was arrested, and when police searched his house, they started flicking through some journals and were stopped dead in their tracks. These books contained hundreds of pages, detailed accounts of abuse of children this guy had done and documented. Thank God he was stupid enough to make a sick diary of this. But when you think it's got horrific enough, it gets worse. He was found guilty of essaying not only the girl in the garden who reported this whole thing, but essaying 2 of his child nieces and 1 patient at the hospital. He was originally given 15 years in prison. But behind bars, what they uncovered was even worse. His sister-in-law came forward and was like, do you know what? Before all of this came out in the public, we'd actually noticed he kind of touched my daughter in an inappropriate way, but I only sort of saw it at a glance. I wasn't 100% sure what I'd seen, and I spoke to my husband and we just decided that it's best not to rock the boat, and maybe we'd imagined it. Looking back and seeing what he was now charged with, she was like, oh my God, he'd abused my child too. It basically started this snowball effect where they realised he'd actually got hundreds of victims. Police looked through hospital records and basically cross-referenced those with the sick diary and found out that he'd abused not 10, not 20, over 300 children that they know of. Police also found a sickening collection of child-sized dolls and over 300,000 images of CSA that he had on his computer. He was SAing little kids during their operations while they were under anaesthetic. It was vile. And for some of these patients, when they were actually told later, many, many years on, that they were actually victims of this guy, it was too much to bear. 2 of his victims, who by that point were grown men, actually decided to end their lives. By 2020, 349 victims had been identified. Mostly both male and female, around 15 years of age. One though was as young as 1. And Joel's own lawyer came forward to say, this guy's actually admitted all this to me and I have a duty to tell the truth. Joel had the cheek to ask the court for leniency because he was admitting it all. He was given 20 years in prison to be served immediately after the 15-year sentence that he was already serving. And I don't know how I feel about this because he's actually now around 75, I believe. I just hope he never gets out, but if he was younger, like, he could just carry on living a normal life after he got out.
Teachers from Hell, story time. So when I was in 4th grade, we had just started taking computer classes, and that was when we got a teacher that we'll call Miss Hateful. Miss Hateful did not like kids. I don't know why she was working with kids, because you could tell she hated us. So a few days after meeting our new computer teacher, she tells us she's going to teach us how to put our fingers on the home row keys. So about 30 minutes after showing us, she walks over to a boy, one of my classmates, and we hear a crack, and he starts crying. She said, "I told you to keep your fingers on the home row keys." Now this woman was very intimidating, so of course nobody jumped in or said anything. We just all looked, saw him crying, and we went back to doing our work because we were scared. So the next day, me and this girl were sitting side by side, and she was chicken pecking, and I said, "Use your home row keys." She said, "I forgot. I don't know what they are." I said, A, S, D, F, J, K, and I was showing her. Then Miss Hateful walks up and says, "Shh, no talking." The girl sitting beside me said, "Miss Hateful, I need to know which home row keys are. I don't know where to put my fingers." And Miss Hateful walks over and says, "Put your fingers where you had them." So she does, and then Miss Hateful pulls out a damn choo-choo pencil and cracks her fucking knuckles. So this girl, of course, starts crying because that fucking hurt. I was scared to death. Like, I was on my P's and Q's about keeping my fingers on the home row keys. Fortunately for me, I was good at typing, but a lot of other kids were not. Just like I'm not good at math and other kids are. It was just some people who did not understand what we were doing. They had never touched a computer before. And those kids would pay the price because she would crack their knuckles open with that damn choo-choo pencil. Well, finally, after a few weeks of this, a parent comes to the school and wants to talk to Miss Hateful. And when the parent comes in the classroom, her and Miss Hateful get into it, and Miss Hateful bullies her down. That first boy who she cracked his knuckles, it was his mother, and was just trying to have a very polite conversation with Miss Hateful about not hitting him with that choo-choo pencil. And Miss Hateful, she wasn't dealing with it. She was a very tall, built, intimidating woman. And whenever she stepped to you, like, people, they feared her. So of course, his mom backs down like, "I'm not trying to fight. I just don't want you putting your hands on my child. I'm going to go to the principal about this." And then Miss Hateful steps to her face and says, "Go. So his mother leaves the classroom and goes to the principal's office, and Miss Hateful looks at us and says, "Don't move and keep your hands on the home row keys." And then she leaves and goes to the principal's office. For the next 30 minutes, all we could hear was Miss Hateful raising hell at that woman and at the principal, and nobody stood up to her. Her husband came out to the school. We could tell she was abusing him. He wouldn't even make eye contact with her. He would just stand there like this. He was scared to death of her. Thank God they didn't have no kids. One day, Miss Hateful comes in the classroom, and she's already pissed. He knew it was going to be a bad time. This girl who sat next to me, she had a really bad temper. She was always bullying other kids and stuff, getting in trouble. Well, Miss Hateful come in and they start having words because she's not using her home row keys. And when Miss Hateful walked over that choo-choo pencil, this girl stood up and said, "I fucking dare you. Do it. I dare you." They start getting into it like they're nose to nose, except this girl's nose is in Miss Hateful's chest because she's so tall and we're just kids. And then she grabs this girl by her shoulder and squeezes as hard as she could. And this girl drops to her knees like one of our biggest bullies that we were scared of, falls down to her knees, and then Miss Hateful drags her to the principal's office. When that girl came back to school the next day, she had finger marks all the way around her shoulder, back in front, where Miss Hateful squeezed it so tight with her nails. And because her parents were abusive, they didn't care that teacher hurt her. They didn't even come out to the school to address it. They told her to get the fuck over it and go back to school, so she did. Because of things like that, the rest of us were terrified of her. All we wanted to do was pass this class and get it over with. So a few weeks later, I guess it was my turn. For whatever reason, she came into class ill that morning. She starts walking around the class, popping people in the back of their heads and on their knuckles with that damn choo-choo pencil. And I'm already looking like, I know she ain't coming over here. I do my work. I'm listening. I'm paying attention. Why is she coming over here with that choo-choo pencil? Sure enough, she walks up behind me and grabs my ponytail and kind of pulls it a little bit and says, "You need to sit up more with your posture." So I don't say anything. She comes back, grabs my shoulder and says, "I told you to sit up." And she grabbed it with her nails and yanks me up like that to straighten my posture. I was so scared. I was shaking. I could barely even type. So when she came back around that next time, my hands were like trembling on the home row keys, and I was typing, missing a lot of words, because it tells you on the computer screen how many words you're missing. So she takes that choo-choo pencil while standing over me and fries my damn knuckles with it. And when she did that, I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't want to cry in front of everybody, but I did cry because it hurt so bad. But I knew right then and there, bitch, you just fucked up. So like I said before, not only was I a daddy's girl, but I was also a big snitch. So anytime something happened to me, I would always go to my parents and tattletale. And I knew, time I got off that damn bus, I was going straight to my daddy. My dad did not play about me, and he was already pulling weekends in jail. So when I got off the bus, my dad wasn't home yet, but my mom was, and I didn't tell her at first. I waited for him to get home. So the time my dad got out that work truck, I showed him my shoulder and my hand, and he said, "Who did that to you?" And I said, "The computer teacher." He said, "The teacher?" I heard him when he went in the house, and him and my mama started yelling because he told her, and then they got on the phone and they called the school. But because it was evening time, the school was already about to close down. The next morning, I get up and get ready for school. Well, as I'm getting done with breakfast, I come out the lunchroom, and I see their old car sitting out in the parking lot, and I said, "Oh, shit." There was one thing you did not want to happen with my parents. You did not want them to come out of that damn school because it was not going to be pretty. The only time they came out of that school was for concerts and trouble, and this wasn't a concert, and I knew damn well I wasn't in trouble. So as we're going from our first period to our art class, everyone can hear my parents yelling from the principal's office all the way down both sides of the hallway, and I mean, it's not good. It's very bad language. I mean, making very serious threats. But my mom, she was the one that surprised me. She was always small, quiet, and just didn't really say much. But this day, she had a temper. She was yelling. She threatened to shove that pencil up her ass. My mom was losing it. My parents were like dogs. If they got mad alone, you could calm them down, talk to them, and handle the situation. But if they got mad together about the same thing, they would feed off each other's anger, and you lose control of the situation, and the cops get called. So at some point, that first boy that was hit, he got hit again, grabbed or something, and his parents came out the same day my parents came out. So now they're arguing with the principal about this teacher, and the principal was just, he was fed up. Like the next day or day after, we found out that Miss Hateful has been fired. And I won't even lie, when I found out she got fired, I was kind of scared that she was going to come back and do something because she was just that scary. She put the fear in us just because she liked to be a bully. She was just a violent abuser. There was no other reason for her to treat us the way she did. But it was a look in her eye. She looked like a demon, like very dark, hateful, and angry, like just something in her was really bad. I wouldn't even be surprised if she wasn't a serial killer or something because when she walked up to you with that pencil, the way she looked at you, like with that hate and disgust in her eyes, it was terrifying. Anyways, we got a new computer teacher and she was so gorgeous. Her name was Miss Kristen, I believe. Very smart and very nice. I just cannot, like, this woman was amazing. She didn't crack our knuckles open. She didn't punch us in the face or snatch our shoulder blades off. Like, she just taught us how to use computer, and we all passed our class. And now every single person who took that class can use computers just fine.
What would you do if your roommate started sleepwalking at night and so you decided to start filming it, and when you watch the footage back, you realize that that's not your roommate? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a woman who says that she caught on camera the exact reason why she will never live with another person again. I've shown the video to 4 people. 2 of them cried, and 1 of them left my apartment without saying anything and texted me an hour later asking me to please never send it to them. The 4th one watched it 3 times and then told me to delete it and never speak about it again. I haven't deleted it, and I don't know why. I think part of me needs proof that I didn't make this up. My roommate Danny and I had been living together for about 8 months when it started. We got along fine, split everything evenly, didn't have any real issues, but she worked early shifts, so she was usually asleep by 10 and I was the night owl. That's relevant because it means I was always awake when it started happening. That first night, I heard her get up. I thought she was going to the bathroom. It was around 2 a.m., and I heard her door open, heard her in the hallway, and then it went quiet. I got up to check because the quiet felt weird and found her standing in the kitchen facing the wall with both palms flat against it. I said her name and she didn't respond. I touched her shoulder and she turned around and walked back to her room and got into bed and never woke up. I looked it up, and the next morning, everything I read said not to startle a sleepwalker, not to make a big deal of it, and that was it. It was usually harmless. I mentioned it to her over coffee, and she had zero memory of it and seemed embarrassed, so I dropped it. But it kept happening. Every few nights, I'd hear her door and find her somewhere in the apartment, standing in the hallway or maybe sitting in the kitchen table. Once she was just in the middle of the living room with her head tilted back slightly like she was looking at the ceiling. I always guided her back to bed and she never remembered any of it. After about 2 weeks of this, I started filming it. Partly because I thought it was wild and I wanted to show her. Partly because I was starting to lose sleep over it and I think some part of me wanted documentation without fully knowing why. The first couple videos were just what I thought I'd been seeing. Her standing somewhere and me guiding her back. Weird, but nothing that made me feel sick. The third video is the one. I heard her around 3 a.m. and grabbed my phone before I even got out of bed. I turned on the flashlight and she was in the hallway, which was normal by then, but the way she was walking was wrong. It's hard to explain in a way that sounds as bad as it actually looks on the tape, but I'll try. Danny's a small person, light on her feet, moves kind of quickly in her normal life. What was in the hallway was moving slowly. Each step was deliberate in a way that felt like whatever was moving her legs was having to think about it, and her arms were slightly away from her body, and her head was down. I stayed in the doorway and I kept filming because I was frozen more than anything else. It walked to the end of the hallway and stopped. Then it turned around. She had never turned around before. She'd always just been standing somewhere and then walked back when I had guided her. She had never, not once, to turn around on her own. It stood there facing me for a second and then it raised its head. And then it looked directly at the camera. Not in my direction, not in the general vicinity of the light, at the camera, dead center into the lens. And the expression on her face was not an expression I have ever seen Danny make in the entire time I've known her. It wasn't blank the way sleepwalkers look in movies. It was focused, patient, like it had been waiting for me to come out of my room and was glad I finally did. We stood there looking at each other for what the timestamp says was 11 seconds, but felt like so much longer. Then it smiled. I shut my bedroom door and locked it and sat against it on the floor until the sun came up. I didn't hear her go back to her room, and I don't know when it happened. In the morning, Danny was completely normal. She made coffee, she asked about my plans, and then she was complaining about what she had to do for that weekend. I sat across from her and watched her face the entire time because I kept thinking about that smile and how long it took her face to do it. I didn't show her the video that day. I couldn't figure out how. 2 nights later, I woke up to my bedroom door handle turning. Not rattling, not banging, slowly turning. As far as the lock would let it go and then holding it there. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I lay there and watched the handle and it stayed like that, turned as far as it could go for a long time. Long enough that I started wondering if I was going to have to watch it all night. Then from the other side of the door, in a voice that sounded almost like Danny, but pitched just slightly wrong, it was too low and too even, and it said, "I know you have it on your phone." I didn't sleep again that night either. I showed Danny the video the next morning, and she watched the whole thing without saying anything. When it got to the part where it looked into the camera, she made a sound I've never heard another person make. The short, sharp exhale like something had knocked the air out of her. She watched it twice more and then handed me my phone back and said she was going to her mom's for a few days. She moved out 3 weeks later. She didn't give me a reason, and I didn't push for one. I think she was just as scared of herself as I was. I've never told her about the door handle or about the voice that I heard. I've thought about it a lot, and I think maybe I'm not supposed to. Anyway, good luck sleeping tonight.
I saw a demon outside of a church during a hurricane and wrote a report about it for school. Story time. So it's September of 96. I'm 11 years old in the 5th grade when our teacher tells us a major hurricane is approaching the coast and she wants us to write a very detailed report on it. We had to give a good description of what we saw before, during, and after the storm, so I was excited because I love to write. Living in North Carolina, we get a lot of these storms and people tend to underestimate them, and that's what happened with this storm. Everybody thought it was going to weaken and turn away. But that ain't what happened. By the end of the day, Hurricane Fran hit some hot water, blew the hell up, and became a Category 4 and was now barreling towards our coast. We just didn't know where it was going to hit. Well, we lived in a small trailer, and typically during a Category 1 or 2 storm, we'd just stay at my grandma's house, but because Fran was so much stronger, we had to find somewhere safer, so we went to a brick church. And we had about 8 or 9 families all piled up in this tiny church, so we buckled down and just hoped for the best. We really felt better when we found out Hurricane Fran had dropped down to a Category 3. Yes, still very dangerous, but not a Category 4. Everything was okay up until we learned that Fran had picked up speed and had now turned and was going to make a direct landfall over our county, which meant the eye of the storm was coming right over us. Which also meant we were going to be hit by the strongest winds that were now reaching up to 140 miles per hour. Then the power went out, so no more TV. Now we're solely depending on a radio that runs off D batteries, and we're running out of batteries. People were really starting to panic because we didn't have Wi-Fi and cell phones back then. All we had was TV and radio, and that was no damn good when the power went out. We literally didn't know what was going to happen until it happened, and by then it was too late to do anything. So Hurricane Fran makes direct landfall, and the church is shaking. I mean, the windows are steady pushing in and out. The roof is starting to lift up and down. Heavy downpours, thunder and lightning, wind gusts, but the scariest thing was how the walls sounded like they were breathing. If you've heard that sound, then you know how creepy it is. So when it started getting bad, one of the adults said, look, before it gets worse, if you kids need to use the bathroom, we need to go ahead and go. Let's go now. Only problem was, this church's bathroom was located outside in a separate building, so we had to go out of the storm to use the damn bathroom. The 90s. Now this bathroom did not have stalls. It was just one room with a toilet. So all of us went into the bathroom together and we just turned the other way. While the last kid is using the bathroom, we're lined up in front of the door holding the door shut because of the wind gust, when all of a sudden the wind blows the door open and we can't get it shut back. During all this commotion, me and another girl get shoved outside the bathroom door and the door slams in between us and the other people, so now we're locked outside and they're inside. She runs to the church through the side door, shuts it, it locks, and doesn't tell anyone that we're out there, so they're locked in the bathroom and I'm locked outside. That little bitch was 16 years old, 4 years older than me, and she didn't tell a soul we were out there. She left us. I still don't like her to this day because of that. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this to us, but I'll share more about that in another video. So I'm standing outside of the bathroom, in between the bathroom and the church. All this wind, rain, pine cones, straw, limbs, shit's blowing around everywhere. It's like a constant tornado. My hair was like just all over the damn place. I couldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped. The wind, the rain, the thunder, stuff blowing around, my hair, it all just stopped. It was calm. We had no idea the storm had made landfall and the eye was directly over us, so I'm standing outside at night in the eye of the storm alone. My ears start popping and the air cools down. It feels like a nice fall day. It feels good, and I get this nostalgic feeling like my favorite song just came on the radio. It felt so good, but then all of a sudden the mood broke and something told me, you better get the hell out of here now, hurry. But I was scared and I didn't want to leave them behind. So she's trying to pull the door back open, I'm trying to push the door open, and my hair is soaking wet. And I turn around, I slick my hair back like this, and that was when I seen it. This very tall, dark figure was standing in between the dogwood tree and the church, just a few feet away from me. At first, I thought it was an adult who was coming out of the church to see what was taking us so long. So I start yelling, come on, we need help. Come help us open the door. But they didn't move. So I stopped snatching on the door altogether, and I pulled my hair back again. And I'm like, why is he standing there like that? What is wrong with him? No lie, what happened next still gives me nightmares. So she's in the bathroom screaming, open the door, open the door. So I face the door and start pushing on it, and when I turn around to see where this thing is, it flies up in my face and just sits there for a couple of seconds. Imagine a tall floating shadow with black holes for eyes. That's the only way I can describe it. This thing had the blackest eyes I ever seen. Just black, dark, soulless holes for eyes. I was so scared I could feel and hear my heart beating in my ears. My whole face was hot. Next thing I knew, it was gone. I don't know if it flew away, disappeared, or what. It was just gone. And then all of a sudden, this tall, skinny pine tree falls, bam, and hits the ground behind the bathroom. So I take off running back to the church. I beat on that church door so hard, like, let me in. There's something out here, and they're stuck in the bathroom. Help. And then all the men ran out, got them out the bathroom. All the other kids are screaming and crying for their mamas, and their parents are wiping them off and changing their clothes, like, are you okay? And I'm just standing there in shock, not moving. My mama walks up and asks, what happened out there? But I don't say anything. The relative that took us out to the bathroom tells my mom she's probably a little shook up because while we were in there, she got locked outside in the storm and a tree fell right beside her. My mama sat me down and was drying my hair and changing my shirt, and I'm still just not talking, not moving. I can't believe what I just saw. Mama said, talk to me, are you okay? What happened out there? I said, I don't know. I saw something and it just weren't right. She said, what do you mean? We were all in here. I said, I don't know, but there was somebody out there. We were face to face before the tree fell. She said, what did it look like? I said, a tall shadow with black headlights for eyes. They were just big giant holes for eyes. She said, with the way that wind was blowing, it was probably a trash bag or some type of clothing blown around in the wind and you thought it was something else. I said, okay, but it stood there before it flew up in my face. Can trash bags stand up? She said, no. I was like, Mama, it's still out there. The monster, it's watching us. It's going to get us. And she said, no, it's not. It's not going to get you. Whatever it is gone. It's out there. It's not going to bother us. She said, I know you see things that everybody else don't always see, but you know they don't react well to it, so let's not talk about it. My mom believed in the supernatural, but I think because there were so many people around, she didn't want them to see me freaking out, and they start freaking out too, so she was trying to calm me down. Then I see the 16-year-old and yell, and you left us out there, and she says, I didn't know y'all were locked out there, lying her ass off as usual. The men who went outside come back in and said, look, the eye of the storm just went over. The second half of the storm is hitting. Y'all get ready. It's going to be bad. Mom starts laughing and says, wow, girl, you experienced something a lot of people will never experience in their entire lifetime. You stood in the eye of a major hurricane alone at night. I know she was just trying to break the mood, but I could tell she was freaked out by me almost being hit by a tree. I'm sitting there playing with my Gigapet, hands still shaking, listening to the wind when my grandma comes over and sits down with me. So I told grandma I thought I saw a demon, and I explained it to her, and she said, no, I think you saw the gray man. I asked who is the gray man, and she said it's a shadowy figure who appears before or during a storm. She said, I bet he was trying to warn you about that tree fall, and I said, well, he's got a funny way of warning people. It scared the hell out of me. Grandma said she saw the gray man years ago when Hurricane Hazel hit. Hurricane Hazel was was one of the most catastrophic hurricanes to ever hit the Carolinas in the early 50s. It was devastating. Now, Grandma's starting to freak out, thinking I saw the gray man and he was trying to warn us that the second half of this storm was going to be a lot worse and we were going to lose our homes. I said, Grandma, I don't think that was the gray man. It didn't look right. I think that was a demon. By now, Hurricane Fran has made direct landfall over us as a Category 3, and she is rocking and rolling, tearing this place apart. Into the next morning, it's still going, and this little church is hanging on by a thread, and we are terrified it's going to fall apart or blow away any minute. So we all huddle up and hold the fort down until Hurricane Fran finally leaves. We walk outside to find that there are power lines and big trees knocked down, houses torn up, roofs blown off. It was bad. So everyone leaves the church, and we start making our way back home, and that's where we find our trailer's completely intact. One piece of paneling blew off the side of our trailer. That was it. Our little trailer was perfectly fine. Now, even though the storm has moved on and is weakening, it is still a very powerful storm, doing a lot of damage to other places. Hurricane Fran killed 27 people and cost millions of dollars in damages. So 11-year-old me writes a report about this hurricane and how I saw a demon outside the church, and I turned it into my teacher. And y'all, for the first time ever, I got an A and a question mark side by side on that report. I can't imagine what she was thinking. But I knew what I saw. I never lied about it before, and I wasn't going to start now. I've lived in North and South Carolina all my life, so I've been through a lot of hurricanes, and I've seen some weird stuff during these storms. I think there's something about the weather that messes with the veil between the living and the dead and allows us to communicate or at least interact with one another, especially during more powerful storms. Me and Brandon had been living together for a little over a year, had our own place, both working, and were doing good. Until one day I come home from work and find his sister Nicole and her boyfriend Timmy laid up in my extra bedroom. Timmy and Nicole already had 2 children that CPS had taken away and placed with relatives, and Nicole was now pregnant with her third. They had intentionally gotten pregnant and said if CPS tried to take this baby, they would go on the run, even though they didn't have a car and couldn't afford a loaf of bread. So Brandon tells me, look, I'm going to let my sister rent that room back there because she's pregnant and homeless. Brandon assures me it's just for a few days and then they'll be gone. But of course, that's not how it went. And because his name is on the lease, I can't stop him. They both moved in, would not work, and just laid up all day eating our food, using our power, and destroying the house. Now, Timmy would smoke here and there, but he didn't really use drugs, but Nicole did. She was a heavy user even while pregnant. So me and her get into it numerous times about her using these substances and drinking while she's pregnant, and of course she don't want to hear it. Well, because Nicole was on probation, her PO shows up at our house and tears the place apart looking for pipes and drugs and stuff like that because she's living in our house and we can't stop him. But I think her and her PO started sleeping together because within a month or so, he quit doing all that. He wasn't even drug testing her, and he was giving her rides to town and stuff and giving her money, so I'm pretty sure they were. One day I get a knock at the door, and it's a CPS caseworker. He asked me where Nicole is, and I said she's back there in that bedroom. So she goes back there, and she talks to Nicole and tells her, you got to start taking drug tests because you're in your 3rd trimester. Nicole refuses, and CPS tells her, if you don't come to this appointment and take this test, we're going to take that baby at the hospital. So one night when Nicole is 7.5 months pregnant, Nicole is missing. So we get in the car, we call the police, and we're all scattered about looking for her pregnant ass. And that's when one of the dealers calls us and says that she's passed out in his front yard and his old lady is not happy about that and we better come and get her. This happens multiple times throughout her pregnancy. So when she's like 8.5 months pregnant, her and her PO get into a big fight in the front yard. I don't know if she wouldn't put out or he wouldn't give her money. Something went on to where they were damn near fist fighting out there. The next thing we knew, he put her in handcuffs, violated her probation, and sent her to jail. Within a month, she goes to her court hearing and they send her off to the prison, and now she's like 9 months pregnant in prison. For a few weeks, all is well at our house, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this will work. But then all of a sudden, we get a phone call. It's Brandon's mama saying that we have to take her 3rd baby because she's already got one, the dad's already got one, and nobody else in the family wants to deal with them, so it's our responsibility. And I said, hell no. We both work too much, we're not here, and I'm not dealing with your sister and her boyfriend. That. One of their aunts steps up to the plate and says that she'll take the baby. Great. The aunt has the baby for the next 3 months, and the baby is thriving, doing great, up until Nicole gets out of prison. She comes to our house and says, look, I'm going to try to get my kids back and I want to do right. I even started going to church. And of course, Brandon fell for it. He lets her move in. 2 weeks later, a CPS caseworker comes out to the home because they're going to give her baby back. I looked this CPS caseworker dead in her eye and I said, are you fucking stupid? Why would you give her this child back when you've already taken 2 other kids from her? This one was born in prison. She hasn't even bonded with this child. The aunt has. Why would you do that? I'm not raising her child, so if you place that child here, you damn well better be monitoring her. And believe it or not, they gave her child back. And because they were staying there, here come Timmy as well. So they're living with us again, and now they have a baby with them. Now, I didn't know, but during all these little interviews and stuff with CPS, My partner Brandon was assuring CPS that he was going to watch his sister. This man was at work all day. He couldn't watch her. It wasn't even a day. By the end of that evening of them having their child back, she disappeared that night. We don't see her for like a week. And I called CPS multiple times. I called a lot. We did so much and nobody would help us. And then she finally shows back up. Her and Timmy get in this big fight. The police get called and CPS comes back out. And then they swear it's not going to happen again. And CPS leaves the baby with them. For the next 2 months, it is absolute chaos in that house. Her and Timmy are fighting. She's staying gone all night. Hell, sometimes a week. The baby ain't got diapers, no milk. They're not taking care of her. I was calling CPS on a weekly basis. They weren't even looking around to see if we had food. Like once they brought the baby, they didn't come back. They weren't even drug testing her and Timmy. So it's January, like really cold weather. She asked me if I would babysit and I said, no, I just got off work. I'm not babysitting for you to go out and get high. Oh, she gets mad. That's how entitled she was. About 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up freezing. I'm like, damn, what in the world? And when I look beside me, there's a little baby laying there. And the window's wide open. Screen's been kicked out. We kept our bedroom door locked at night because they stole stuff. And this bitch had done broke into our bedroom door, left the baby on the bed, and then snuck out the window to go meet up with her dealer. I was up all night with a sick, angry baby. I had to be at work at friggin' 6 o'clock the next morning. A couple of days later, her and Timmy get into it and they tear the damn house apart while we're at work. We come home, find this big mess, and I'm just fed up. I called CPS so much, I knew them on a first name basis. And when I spoke to this worker, who was the supervisor, and assured me she was going to check into this and do something, I warned her, this child is going to get hurt. She does not watch her. She don't feed her. All she cares about is getting high and getting the benefits. Supervisor had the nerve to say to me, well, doesn't the child's father live there? Can't he help out? I said, he could, but he don't. So me and Brandon get in this big fight, and I mean, it was like one of the worst ones we ever had about them living with us. I tell Brandon, I'm done, I'm out. So I start packing my stuff and Brandon leaves to go back to work. So I start taking my stuff to my parents' house, and on the third trip back, when I pull up in the driveway, I see 4 police cars and 2 white vans parked out front. I get out of the car and the sheriff deputies and the CPS workers come running up and they're like, where's the mother? Where's the father? We have to talk to them right now. This is unacceptable. I could tell these caseworkers were just putting on a show in front of the cops. Now they demanded to know where Nicole was, and I told them I have no idea. She smokes crack. She's never here. Like I've been telling you for months. Nicole was supposed to take the baby to CPS for an appointment and she never showed up, and they were just now coming to the house to confront her about missing that appointment. But when they got to the house, guess who they found crawling out on the edge of the highway? The baby. And guess who was supposed to be at home with the baby but had left the screen door wide open? Nicole. So I said, really? I've been begging you for months to do something to help this baby. Now you want to step in. As a matter of fact, I don't even know why I'm talking to you because this has nothing to do with me. I'm moving out. Off. The sheriff deputy walks over and was like, I know it's annoying and aggravating, but if you could just help her find the bottles and diapers, they're going to take the baby now. And I said, oh, finally, really? They're going to take the baby? Well, okay, I will help you, no problem. Let me go get this bag together. So then Brandon comes home and he's like, what in the world is going on? And we tell him, and he's like, is somebody getting charged? I said, believe it or not, no, they're not charging them with child neglect. Nothing. They're getting away with it again. The sheriff's supervisor looks at me and says, well, ma'am, there's nothing we really can do about this. The child is not hurt or injured. I said, she was crawling on the highway, found by a CPS caseworker, and you're telling me there's nothing you can do? They should have negligence stamped on their forehead. I go in the house and start snatching up bottles, diapers, toys, clothes, whatever I can find, and put it in a diaper bag, get her clean diaper and clothes on her, hand her over to the caseworkers, and I leave. But what pissed me off was after it all happened and after I moved out, Nicole had the nerve to call me and tell me this was my fault because I wouldn't babysit for her. I said, bitch, it ain't my responsibility to take care of your child that you intentionally brought into this world after 2 others had been taken. That's on you. So we have a heated exchange and I said, look, bitch, I'll beat your ass. You just don't realize how far gone I am right now. And she kept pushing and pushing until I finally got in the car and I went over there and I beat her ass. So they ended up taking the baby back to the aunt's house. And of course, Nicole and Timmy swore they were going to get this baby back. They were going to do right, and they never did. This aunt has raised that child ever since. She's still there now. But I couldn't even believe that they let these people have this child to begin with when they had already taken the first 2. And that's what's wrong with the system.